Chinese government is embracing private companies so it can keep them closer to the Communist Party. Welcome to China Uncensored. I'm Shelley Zhang, filling in for Chris Chappell, who's off fulfilling his lifelong dream of snowboarding down Mount Everest while being chased by Himalayan wolves. But what's really keeping Chris going, other than the wolves, is knowing that Operation Honeypot is dedicated to fighting YouTube's suppression of China Uncensored. So remember to watch to the end of this episode and leave a honeypot comment below. Chris is counting on us. For all you business owners out there, if you want to take your commercial success to the next level, then China is the place for you. Yes sirree, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. After all, China's second-in-command, Li Qiang, has repeatedly said that China is open for business. Here's an actual photo of China being open for business. And according to the top Pooh Bear himself, Chinese leader Xi Jinping, China remains an ideal, secure, and promising destination for foreign investors. Don't believe him? Just ask state-run media. The extension of Xi's spirit, otherwise known as the Global Times, calls China a development oasis for global businesses, while the Communist Party's official outlet, People's Daily, assures readers that China works hard to ensure fair competition for all market players. Yeah, competition will be fair. Every business will have arbitrary crackdowns equally. Last month, a much applauded new Chinese law intended to promote private enterprise took effect. It defines the legal status of private enterprises and affirms that private sector development is a long-term national goal. And most importantly, it's sure to boost growth and confidence, at least according to the Global Times. And it's perfect timing, because growth and confidence are desperately needed in today's China. They're about as grown and confident as the guy in that song, I Wish I Was a Little Bit Taller. Me too, Skilo, me too. So, Chinese consumer confidence has been closing in on an all-time low in the past year. And even though China's official growth numbers have stayed high, there's been a growing focus on all the issues in the economy that the official figures don't show. China's growth figures are about as trustworthy as guys on dating sites saying they're 6 feet tall. The situation hasn't been helped by the trade chaos unleashed by Trump's tariffs. Now, at the same time, foreign direct investment into China has slumped to a 30-year low in recent years, for reasons, which I'll come back to. So China really needs an economic facelift, and the CCP clearly hopes that its private business push can convince both foreign and domestic players to put their faith and money, lots and lots of money, in the Chinese market. I'd say there's no way it's going to work, but if I've learned anything in life, it's to never underestimate how the allure of Chinese money can make people really, really stupid. And after all, it's worked before. But despite all the encouraging rhetoric recently, the fact remains that China isn't easy for private companies. Government crackdowns in recent years have massively shrunk the private sector's slice of big business, and some industries may never fully recover. But hey, you can trust the brutal authoritarian regime that they've changed their ways. And I bet they're just crossing their fingers behind their backs to, stretch them out. And it's not just big private enterprises and their icons that have been knocked down, like Alibaba's founder Jack Ma. Smaller businesses and their owners have also found themselves on the wrong side of the Chinese Communist Party. Early last year, for example, local officials from the southern Guangdong province crossed into Wuhan in the central Hubei province to detain executives and employees of a popular streaming platform on charges of running an illegal gambling operation. And I'm sure they had concrete proof of this, and I'm not setting you up for a frustrating reveal 30 seconds from now. The Guangdong officials also confiscated more than $41 million from the company and had the money transferred to their own account, which bankrupted the company. So the Guangdong officials went outside their jurisdiction to prosecute a business in another province, and, as if that weren't enough, they also did so without providing any kind of evidence to justify their actions. Here's the frustrating reveal. This was nothing less than a shameless cash grab by the Guangdong local government. In fact, the move was so blatant that a court soon decided that the whole thing was illegal. You know how corrupt you have to be for a corrupt system to be like, hey, tone it down a notch, man? In a similar case, a business owner going by the pseudonym Zhang Ke had his business ruined when local authorities in northern China reportedly froze his bank accounts in July and demanded that he pay $55,000 to have the freeze lifted. According to Voice of America, Zhang said that he called several anti-corruption hotlines for help but received no reply, which is actually better than what I would have expected from anti-corruption hotlines in China, which would just be a 9-hour recording of maniacal laughter. Zhang has been on the run in Guangdong since September. Reports on Chinese social media detail nearly 10,000 similar incidents in Guangdong province alone. Many of these cases are being called offshore fishing or fishing the high seas for the way that local officials are clearly willing to go fishing for funds far and wide for themselves and their own local government. Overfishing in China, a problem literally and metaphorically. According to visiting professor at Hunter College Teng Biao, the prevalence of offshore fishing has to do with the economic downturn that China finds itself in these years. He told Voice of America that the local governments used to rely on selling land for financial resources, but the economic downturn and crippled property market stripped them of that option. That provides an incentive for frequent cross-provincial law enforcement. Well, that's the kind of treatment private Chinese companies get in China. While foreign companies in China haven't been targeted in quite the same way, they've felt the hammer too. And since this is the Chinese Communist Party, I assume also a sickle. In 2023, Chinese authorities raided a number of foreign consultancies and due diligence firms and detained several employees over allegations of spying and endangering China's national security. That happened around the same time that the government revised its anti-espionage laws, which made it next to impossible for foreign businesses in China that work with Chinese data to know when their everyday operations might be considered a threat to national security. Drew Thompson, a senior research fellow at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, told Reuters that the law means that practically any information can be considered a threat to China's national security. Which isn't surprising since the CCP is more insecure than guys on dating sites saying they're 6 feet tall. Now, on top of all this uncertainty, private companies in China, domestic and foreign, also face heavy discrimination and competition with state-owned enterprises. These government-run companies often get special benefits, like easier access to credit and markets, that private businesses don't get. Lists are even published every year that detail all of the fields that are reserved for state-owned companies, stretching from finance to media. There's actually also a separate list that details all the fields that foreign investors are barred from entering. What a great sales pitch. Do business in China, where we'll crack down on you for espionage that you didn't commit, exclude you from industries, and potentially even rob you blind. Hey, where are you going? The point is, state-owned enterprises get lots of advantages in China. But starting about 15 years ago, they'd actually been going down in terms of overall top market capitalization. But now, after the crackdowns on private industries along with the recent property crisis, state-owned enterprises are getting bigger again. So let's say you're a private company that's managed to avoid forbidden industries as well as dodge local authorities trying to take your money on fishing trips. You still can't avoid the murky quagmire of the Chinese legal system. In this system, labor laws are selectively enforced, if they're enforced at all, and there are strong signs that bankruptcy laws can be used to cheat investors and force partners into bankruptcy proceedings. At the same time, poor IP protection in the Chinese legal system has reportedly caused irreparable harm to foreign companies, not to mention the tendency of Chinese actors to use the courts to invalidate patents held by foreign companies. But hey, at least none of that is happening outside China. Oh, wait. If you put a lot of this together, it makes sense why former U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo referred to China as uninvestable in 2023. You'd get more of a return just lighting your money on fire because then at least you could keep warm against the chilling feeling of being duped by China again. But of course, that was all before China's new private sector law swooped in to guide the way toward brighter days. Things will be different now. The new law states that industrial policies must not violate competition policies, and that selective enforcement is strictly prohibited, while restrictions or exclusions targeting private firms in bidding or government procurement are prohibited as well. Boy, that sure does sound like a tasty carrot, and I'm sure it's not attached to any strings. It even addresses the cross-jurisdiction prosecution of entrepreneurs. Those are those local government fishing trips I was talking about earlier. Now China's truly ready to live up to its promotion as an oasis for private businesses. And they really need an oasis because China is quickly becoming an economic desert. There's just the tiny issue of the leadership guarding the gates of this oasis. You see, the new law also clearly affirms that efforts to promote the private economy must adhere to the leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, uphold the people-centered approach, and maintain the socialist system with Chinese characteristics to ensure the correct political direction of private economic development. I'd say you always need to pay attention to the fine print, but they couldn't have made this more clear if it was printed in 72 bold Comic Sans, the tackiest of fonts. The guy setting the course for the party, Xi Jinping, has made it quite clear what the correct political direction is for much of the private economy. Xi is urging high-level science and technology self-reliance to serve high-quality development, and that's going to take a lot of innovation. That means that Chinese companies must dominate in fields such as green energy, semiconductor manufacturing, and robotics, even though the CCP seemingly already has plenty of soulless automatons. And it doesn't just include carving out a dominant position in terms of development or startups. It's about sitting on the entire production chain, from research to manufacturing to extraction and processing of the minerals needed for the whole shebang. And I'm sure the people extracting the minerals will be well compensated and have great work benefits. This is part of Xi's larger dual circulation policy. It involves keeping China's development on a detached, self-sustaining track that's unaffected by outside disturbances. It's essentially been described as a strategy designed for relying less on foreigners. But that doesn't mean that foreigners should rely less on China. On the contrary. This feels like someone asking you to give them your Twix, and the deal is it'll be 2 for them and none for you, but they'll be kind enough to let you watch them eat it. And while the Chinese government wants to lead the world's high-tech breakthroughs from a secure bubble, they'll be happy to sell all their cheaper knockoff products to the rest of the world, bankrupting foreign companies and taking over entire industries. So essentially, money please! Look, we already know what dependence on Chinese export dominance looks like. For example, China's near monopoly on certain rare earth minerals. The CCP has used their monopoly to punish other countries and to get them to cave to the party's demands on multiple occasions. That's only going to get worse. So, overall, private companies in China are stuck navigating in a highly politicized and state-directed economy. And while companies supposedly have their rights guaranteed in China's new private sector law, the CCP still has the overriding right to demand obedience from everyone. As the diplomat says, the new law clearly signals that private enterprise is welcome only as long as it serves the party's broader political objectives. And for cutting-edge foreign companies operating in China, the situation is especially dicey, given the signs that whatever they are producing, the Chinese government eventually wants local companies to make instead. I'm talking to you, NVIDIA. The more chips you launch for China, the faster they're stealing from you. Because China cares about consent about as much as Kirby cares about chewing. As China scholar Doug Guthrie said after he left Apple, quite simply, you don't get to do business in China today without doing what the Chinese government wants you to do. Period. No one is immune. No one. When the CCP starts whistling, you'd better be ready to dance. If you're a private company in China, you can't expect your privacy to be respected. So with that said, come on down, entrepreneurs. China is open for business. You know, every week I write the free China Uncensored Substack newsletter. You should sign up to get even more China news, a special behind-the-scenes look at the show, and I'll even show you Chris's text messages. So subscribe to the newsletter. The link is below. I'm Shelley Zhang, filling in for Chris Chappell. Thanks for watching.